Oli here, and this is my review of Full Circle, the third story of the 18th season of classic Doctor Who, starring Tom Baker as the fourth Doctor. Full Circle is the 112th story overall, it's 4 parts long, and is written by Andrew Smith. So, Full Circle is the first story of the E-Space Trilogy arc, in which it has 3 stories in which the Doctor and his companions are pretty much trapped in a mini universe with negative coordinates, so to speak, and they ended up there because the Doctor accidentally actually wanted to go to Gallifrey, but then they got stuck into a CVE, and that's how they ended up in E-Space. So the plot of Full Circle is as follows. Attempting to return home to Gallifrey, the Doctor, Romana, and Kanan find themselves on the planet Alzarius, as the local inhabitants retreated in terror to their marooned spacecraft. The Doctor sets out to investigate, and a group of young rebels take Romana hostage in the TARDIS. Besieged by the reptilian creatures rising from the marshes, the colonists of the Starlander face a bleak future without the Doctor's help. Can he uncover the dark truth about Mistfall before it's too late? So that is the plot of Full Circle. So I think Full Circle is definitely the first great story in the John Nathan Turner era, and I think Full Circle is a big improvement to the first 2 stories of the season. And in the production, I must really give comment to it. Like, it was mostly filmed on location. Some of it was filmed in the BBC television studios. And I liked how the foresty, marshy, swampy setting of Alzarius and the sets were quite good as well. Like the Starland, and obviously the Starland model looked really impressive. And you also liked how I think I really liked the special effect of how the Doctor was, how the TARDIS ended up getting trapped in E-Space. They had this like vibrating thing around. So it's even on the box set cover, like this is what we actually saw in the story, like the TARDIS getting trapped in this thing which was called the CVE, which pretty much caused the Doctor and his companions to be trapped in E-space. Yes, and also like the caves where Vash's crew were staying at. It looked very cavey, so to speak. And oddly enough, I liked Romano's room in the TARDIS. Yes, and as I said before, I think it's all the ordinary things that are quite appealing to me in Doctor Who. The script is very well done, and Andrew Smith, the writer of the story, was actually 17 years old when he wrote Full Circle, which thought was quite impressive. And Smith was actually a fan of Doctor Who, and I was quite impressed that he wrote such an incredible story. And I thought the direction by Peter Grimwald was quite good as well. And I think the plot of his Full Circle was quite good. I liked how it pretty much kicked off the E-Space Trilogy, which is basically another universe with negative coordinates in comparison to End Space, which is our universe, or the Doctor's universe, which has like positive coordinates. And as I said before, they got caught up in the E space when they got sucked into a CVE, which brought them to Alzarius. I also liked how the plot has like themes of evolution, which is basically like the Marshmen being the ancestors of the Alzarians, politics, how the Deciders are pretty much ruling, well, pretty much residing over like law and giving law and order and the Starland and to other Alzarians, and how pretty much and how they're pretty much some of the things that the Deciders knew are basically lies, and they're pretty much selling the other Alzarians lies because they actually, well, Nefred and Drift actually knew that they were the only ones that knew that they couldn't get to the planet they wanted to go to because they never actually got there because they never actually left it. They were pretty much just based on Alzarius. Yes, and I think at the end of the story, no one other than those other deciders knew about the truth. And of course, the other theme was basically morals and how I think the story pretty much gives off the morals of it. It was a small subplot. It was basically how Dexter wanted to experiment on the Marsh child for the sake of the Alzarians, but the Doctor didn't really agree with the experimentation because it's a child. You really wouldn't experiment on a child, would you? And that was a very good plot inclusion, and the inclusion of these topics pretty much made the story more interesting and something, and gave it more gravitas to stand on in comparison to the rest of the seasons. The pacing was quite well done, although I must say that part one did have a slow build, but it was quite worth it for the rest of the story. I think Full Circle definitely had some very memorable moments, including the cliffhangers. My favorite cliffhangers was when the Doctor and Kana witnessed the Marshmen pretty much coming out of the marsh. And actually, it reminded me of the Sea Devils when, in their own story, when the Sea Devils were pretty much coming out of the sea. I also liked Vash's death and how, and it was quite interesting. And I liked how Adric was like trying to rescue him, and Adric was actually like this close to rescuing him, but then one of the marshmen just pretty much dragged him back inside and unfortunately killed him. I also liked the bit when the Marsh child went berserk when he was trying to be experimented on, but it pretty much failed because it pretty much had some sort of psychic link of Romano, who was bitten by a crab spider in the end of part 2, and which pretty much placed her under hypnosis. Yes, and then he pretty much went berserk, killed Dexter, and ended up accidentally killing himself because he saw the Doctor on screen. I mean, I think the Marshmen invading the plot lines, the Starliner, was a very good plot, and it made the part 4 quite interesting. The performances, and I think they were all quite good. Tom Baker was still in serious mode, but he was very good in the story, and this is pretty much going to be like for the rest of the season, as he's more serious than humorous, but he does have some moments of humor that pretty much crop up, especially the point in the story when the Deciders were introducing themselves, and the Doctor was like, "I'm the Doctor," and had like the biggest, like they had a very big ass grin on his face, which I thought was quite funny, and I also like how I was pretty much pleading with Dexter to not to experiment on the Mars child so he can like pretty much do it for benefit the benefit the Valzarians, but then the Doctor didn't want to do so because he was still a child, and obviously when the Doctor met the Mars child, it was still quite afraid. It was like it's like if you see like a child or something, it looks very scared, and you just like show it kindness and stuff like that. It starts becoming more attached to you. So and that pretty much happens because the Doctor obviously when just as soon as the Doctor's complaints were ignored and Dexter was literally about to like make the first incision in the Marsh Child's head, that's when the connection between the Marsh Child and Romana kicked in, and he pretty much just went snapped and basically killed Dexter, and the Doctor was telling it not to, but then obviously the Marsh Child saw the Doctor on the screen, and it was like became like attached to his image because obviously the Doctor was was the only person to actually show the Marsh Child kindness, but then he accidentally like smashed the screen and gets electrocuted and dies, which obviously the Doctor was quite distraught about. And at the start of the story, I actually liked how he was comforting Romana because it was pretty obvious that it needed to return to Gallifrey because Romana was no longer needed in the TARDIS because she only helped the Doctor out for the key to time, and that quest was long over. It was like long over, so she had to go back to Gallifrey, and Romana didn't really want to go because she was enjoying her time with the Doctor. Speaking of, speaking of which, Lala Ward was actually very good in the story, and I would say that the Full Circle is definitely one of her best performances. Romana is pretty much separated from the Doctor for most of the story because I think that her relationship with Tom Baker was starting to get a little bit worse, and I think it was because I think he wanted to like start things over with Lala Ward, but then she turned him down, which obviously made Tom Baker rather sour, so to speak. But Romana does actually meet Vash and his gang, and obviously they want to like to hijack the TARDIS, but then Romana pretty much outsmarts them and takes control back on the TARDIS, which I actually kind of liked. And the reason why Adric and Vash and the rest of the gang were able to find the TARDIS because at the end of part 1, Romana gave Adric a TARDIS homing device, which he was able to locate the TARDIS, and then that's how they all ended up trapped in the TARDIS. That's how they ended up in the TARDIS. Yes, and obviously Romana was pretty much placed under some form of hypnosis or under control by the Marshmen because she was bitten by a crab spider at the end of part 2 because the TARDIS accidentally took off thanks to Adric, which ended up on the Starliner, but then when she was bitten, but then the Doctor and Adric were able to go back to the cave and they found Romana and she was very catatonic, so to speak, and then that's when she was pretty much starting to like lose control, and that's how she pretty much came under control by the Marshmen. And at the end of part 3, she was pretty much responsible for allowing the Marshmen into the Starliner because and that's how they pretty much caused havoc into the TARDIS in the Starliner. And I thought, and then she was pretty much acting as if she was a Marshman as well, minus the killing, but she was very much very Marshman-y. And I thought that acting was quite good by Ward, and the Doctor was able to help Romana get back to normal. And I like the scene when she pretty much she's back to her old self, and the Doctor was with Kiara in the lab, and they were talking about stuff, and the Romana pretty much gives a suggestion, and she gives like a very big grin on her face, indicating that she's back to normal. I kind of like that scene. Kanan was alright in the story. I do like how Kanan pretty much has his own theme, which is called Kanan on the Mission. I think it's on Spotify, and he's pretty much just traveling across Alzarius. He doesn't really do much, but when he tracks down the Marsh, but he does other than tracking down the Marshman, no, following the Marshman because the Doctor told him to, and finding Romana and the TARDIS. And obviously, at one point he does find the TARDIS in the cave where the Marshman were. Unfortunately, Kanan gets his head whacked off by the Marshman when he arrives. Pretty much, when Kanan was like, there's no need to panic. I'm in data observation mode," and then, but obviously the Marshman didn't understand what it was, so they pretty much just whacked Kanan's head off. And that was quite funny. It was. I do appreciate the dark comedy of the scene. That pretty much like the note that played when to show Romana's reaction to seeing Kanan get decapitated. It was. I think that was definitely like the funniest scene of season 18. But after the Kanan got beheaded, Romano was able to recover his body, but his head was missing. And it turned out that one of the Marshmen pretty much grabbed Kanan's head and put it on the stick, which the Doctor did find back in the start, and that's how he was pretty much repaired. And then after that scene, Kanan was pretty much inactive for most of that story. And we also had the debut of Adric. Like he's the new companion. He is the teenage mathematical genius that wanted to be a part of his brother Vash's gang, and he's portrayed by Matthew Waterhouse. And as I said in various other reviews, I was not the biggest fan of Adric. I couldn't stand the guy. And no offense to Matthew Waterhouse. I mean, there's nothing against Matthew Waterhouse, but I do find Adric very irritable, bratty, and whiny. But I do think Waterhouse is a very good actor and played Adric very well. But I think he's just very annoying. But he's not as annoying as he was in season 19. He was alright in this season, but although he was a bit irritating here and in State of Decay, but I think his more annoying side pretty much came out in season 19, where he's just pretty much arguing with the Doctor all the time, siding with the villains for no odd reason whatsoever. It was just no. When he died in Earthshock, I was actually quite happy about it. So Adric decides to stay in the TARDIS at the end because he didn't want to stay in Alzarius any longer, so he pretty much hides in the TARDIS, and the Doctor and Wanda don't actually find out he was stood in the TARDIS well into State of Decay, the following story. I do like how Adric tried to save Vash from the Marshman, but it was too late and he ended up getting killed. And I think Adric's defining scene, he was trying to steal some of the fruit from the river, but he ended up getting caught by Drafe. He was under the Deciders, and when Drafe was killed by the Marshman, he pretty much told Adric to tell Dexter that everything has come full circle. And that's how he pretty much finds the Doctor. And after Vash dies, he runs into the after Drafe dies, he runs into the TARDIS, trying to find help. Where he meets the Doctor and Romana for the first time, and they tend to his injured knee, which healed quite quickly. On to the side cast. There are a lot of side characters in the story, and oddly enough, they were actually all very good and contributed to the plot. First off, we had the Marsh Child, an infant Marshman that was found by the Doctor. But it was later captured alongside the Doctor. It was taken to the Deciders, so to speak. And then it went crazy thanks to Romana because Dexter was trying to like experiment on it, and then obviously Romana was trying to act like a Marshman, and the Marsh Child actually killed Dexter. And then when he saw the Doctor's image on the screen, it accidentally destroyed the screen, and that's how it done. I actually liked this. I actually liked the Marsh Child. It was a very interesting character in comparison to the other Marshmen, and I thought it was definitely good to show like a child Marshman, and that was very interesting. Then we had Dexter. He was a scientist on the Starline, and I wanted to experiment on the Marsh Child when the Deciders gave him permission to do so, and he wanted to experiment on the child because it was to benefit the rest of the Alzarians. But he was later killed by the Marsh Child. Then we also had Drafe. He was the original head of the Deciders, but he was killed by a Marshman. His death was witnessed by Adric, and he tells Adric to tell Dexter that everything has come full circle. And then on to the other deciders, the survival, the deciders who saw for most of the story. First off, we had Nefred. He was the head of the decider after Drafe was killed, and he had access to the system files, which basically like a history book of Valzerius and what was going on and shit like that. So it was obviously written by the Pterodonians and was given to the Alzarians, and included the fact that the Marshmen were actually Alzarians. He allowed Dexter to experiment on the Marsh Child, explaining that would be good for the greater good of the community. But in Part 4, he was killed by the Marshmen, and he revealed to his other deciders, Gareth and Lugan, that they can't go back to Pterodon because they never went there, and they never came from there. I thought he was a very good character, a good character in terms of being written quite well. He had good moral. Was on the side of good, but he had great morals like the other deciders. But he was an alright character. Then we had Gareth, another decider, along with Logan, and he survived the end of the story, and he pretty much found out with Logan that he couldn't go back to that the Alzarians couldn't go back to Pterodon. And then the other decider was Logan. He was chosen to be a decider after Nefred had became the leader after Drafe's death, and he is also the father of Kiera, who was a member of Varsha's group. He was distraught when the deciders pretty much decided to close the doors because of the Starlander, knowing that Kiera couldn't make it back. But then after becoming a decider, he didn't really care much for her. But then when the TARDIS brought Kiera and the other members of the group into the Starliner, he pretty much was like caring for her again, and I pretty much told the other decided that they shouldn't punish the group because of Kiara. But after the events of the story, Logan and Gareth decide to leave Alzarius. And then we also have the group. Var, she was the leader of the Outlaws, that's the name of the group, and he was Adric's older brother. He unfortunately died, and his belt was given to Adric by Kiera, saying that he saved their lives. And I think Varsh was quite protective of Adric for obvious reasons, but at the same time, he didn't really like care for Adric, such like Adric, but he did actually care for Adric. But I really liked his character, and his death was quite good. And obviously, I think his death had somewhat of an impact on Adric. And even at the end of Earthshot, when Adric died, he was pretty much holding onto Varsh's belt. And then we had Kiera, Logan's daughter, and she didn't want Adric being in the group for obvious reasons, and she was upset over Varsh's death, and she gave his belt to Adric. Again, have Tylos. He was another member of the Outliers, and he was the one that pretty much told Adric to prove his worth, to steal some of the fruits in order to become a member of their group. And I think he was second in command of the Outliers, and he died trying to save one of the other Alzarians in the Starliner from the Marshmen. And I thought they were all very good characters, so to speak, and definitely one of the more memorable side characters in season 18. And we have the enemies of the story, the Marshmen. Even though I wouldn't really classify them as villains because they didn't have really any characteristics that would class them as villains, even though they did kill a few people and whacked off K9's head. But the only reason why they did this because they were very underdeveloped, and they weren't able to like adapt to certain things quite well. Like they were only used to water, and basically they were only used to water and couldn't really breathe in oxygen properly, and they found it quite harmful unless they fully adapted into it. So the Marshmen were semi-aquatic humanoids, and they emerged every 50 years, and this event was called Mistfall. They were quite aggressive towards the Alzarians, and they were pretty much responsible for killing the original Pterodonians that were on Alzarius. But then the Marshmen that killed the Pterodonians became Alzarians, and when they invaded the Starliner, they killed quite a lot of people, but they left because they were starting to adapt to the oxygen, so they didn't really have like any form of comeuppance because it was later found out that it was later revealed that the Marshmen were indeed the Alzarians because it was pretty much like some form of evolution that was going on because they started off as the crab spiders, and then the crab spiders evolved into the Alzarians, sorry, the Marshmen, and then the Marshmen pretty much evolved into the Alzarians, which is basically their final form. And how it was hinted at like part of the story, but then it was fully confirmed in part 4 when the Doctor found Dexter's DNA sample along with the DNA sample of the crab spider and the marshman. And the reason why I think they're anti-villains is because they didn't have any really clear intentions. They obviously didn't. They obviously like attacking people to survive, attacking, killing people to survive, which is basically like survival of the fittest. Is like if you're unable to adapt to certain, if you're unable to adapt, you're pretty much dead, and whoever survives who pretty much wins. I think this was definitely like the point of Full Circle. When they were unable to adapt to things like oxygen, hence they're under development, but they were able to like develop later on, so to speak. So the faults of this story, I didn't really like how K9 was destroyed and made inoperable in the story, and this is pretty much a recurring theme until K9 leaves in Warriors Gate. I understand that, but the writer didn't really like K9, but I think a simpler option would just been leaving him in the TARDIS or basically having his battery still exhausted from Meglos. Because although that scene was quite funny, I do think it was just a bit. Do you really have to see Kane in the street again? But also, I do think more could have been done to at least. There could have been at least a scene where Ajik was pretty much lamenting Vash's death and being upset and having some form of survivor's guilt of him being unable to like save his brother. So to conclude, I think Full Circle is a great story which pretty much saves season 18 from being a complete dud, so to speak. It's an interesting watch, and I give Full Circle an 8 out of 10. My next review will be the second story of the E-Space Trilogy, which is State of Decay, so stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching this video. Please let me know what your thoughts of Full Circle. Please subscribe to this channel, and if you haven't done so already, and follow me on the social media links below. And I have a very special announcement coming very soon, so stay tuned for that. So see you around.